You're just too boring for me. Long term, he said. At the time, I laughed, thinking it was just one of his teasing comments. But that night, when I saw how serious his eyes were, something in me cracked. My name is Deborah Grant. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how I learned that stability can feel like a curse in the wrong hands. I've never been the spontaneous type. I don't book flights on a whim or dance on bar counters just to feel alive. I'm the one who remembers birthdays, waters plants, and keeps extra batteries in the drawer just in case. For the longest time, I thought that made me dependable. Apparently, to some people, it just makes you boring. When I met Richard, he said that was what he loved about me, that I was the calm in his storm. He had this infectious energy, the kind of man who could walk into any room and make everyone turn toward him. And at first, I thought we balanced each other. He'd bring adventure, I'd bring peace. It felt like harmony until it didn't. We'd been together a little over 2 years when it happened. That evening, I made dinner something simple but thoughtful. Spaghetti with roasted garlic and parmesan the way he liked it. I'd even picked up a bottle of red wine because I wanted the night to feel special. Richard sat on the couch scrolling through his phone while I cleared the dishes. Richard, I said, drying my hands on a towel, I've been thinking, maybe we should move in together. He didn't even look up at first. Move in, he repeated like I'd just asked him to run away to Mars. Yeah, I said, smiling nervously. We spend most nights together anyway. It just makes sense. He finally set his phone down, smirking. Deborah, you're sweet. But come on, you really think living together would work? I frowned. Why wouldn't it? He leaned back, arms stretched lazily over the couch. Because honestly, you're just too safe for me long term. The words hit like a slap. Safe, I echoed. He shrugged, as if explaining something obvious. You're dependable. You plan everything. You like routines. And that's nice, I guess. But I don't want nice forever. I want passion. I want sparks. I want someone who makes me feel like life's unpredictable. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. None came. He smiled, almost pityingly. Don't take it the wrong way. You're perfect for now, but not for always. Something inside me went quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there trying to process that the man I'd loved for 2 years was describing me like a placeholder in his timeline. Finally, I said quietly, So, what exactly are we doing then? He laughed an easy, careless sound. Deborah, relax. Why do you always have to turn things into something serious? We're having fun, aren't we? Let's just enjoy it. Fun. That word twisted in my chest. To him, I was a chapter. To me, he was the whole story. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while he snored beside me. The room smelled faintly of his cologne, something crisp and arrogant. I kept hearing his voice replaying in my mind. You're just too safe. And for the first time, I wondered if being safe was a bad thing, or if I'd just chosen someone who only valued chaos. The next morning, I made coffee while he scrolled through his phone again, laughing at something on social media. I tried to act normal, asking, "What's so funny?" He grinned. Madison sent a video. She's crazy. You'd like it. Madison, his ex. He still talked to her as friends, or so he said. I told myself not to read into it. But there was a light in his eyes when he said her name, the kind that used to be there when he looked at me. Over the next few weeks, that light dimmed for me and grew for her. Our Friday nights, once filled with movies and laughter, turned into him saying, I'm meeting some people from work. Don't wait up. He'd come home past midnight smelling of alcohol and someone else's perfume. I told myself not to overthink. I told myself that love requires patience. But deep down, something darker whispered, he's already halfway gone. I stopped bringing up moving in. I stopped asking about his nights out. I started walking on eggshells in my own relationship, quiet, careful, waiting for him to remember that I was enough. But he didn't. One evening, while I was folding laundry, he came home beaming. You should have seen Madison tonight, he said, tossing his jacket aside. She jumped on the bar and started singing. Everyone was cheering. I forced a small smile. Sounds wild. He chuckled. Yeah, she just makes everything feel electric. You'd never do something like that. That one stung more than I wanted to admit. I turned back to the laundry, pressing a wrinkle flat with shaking hands. He didn't even notice. Later that night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering in the distance. The reflection, staring back at me, looked like a ghost, the version of myself I'd slowly muted for him. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed awake, waiting for him, all the quiet dinners, all the little things I did, hoping he'd see how much I cared. And for what? To be called boring. Maybe that's when it truly hit me. I was building a future with someone who never intended to stay in it. The next morning, he kissed my forehead casually before heading out. "Don't wait up," he said without even looking back. And for once I didn't. I sat at the kitchen table long after the door shut behind him, the silence pressing heavy around me. It was strange that silence used to scare me, but now it felt almost comforting. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for his voice to fill it. I didn't know it yet, but that silence would become my greatest weapon. It's funny how you can spend years building something only to watch it crumble quietly in the background while you pretend not to see it happening. That was my life for the next few weeks. Richard and I still called each other boyfriend and girlfriend, but what we had wasn't a relationship anymore. It was a memory we were both too lazy to let go of. He started spending more nights out with coworkers. He said it like an apology, though his tone made it clear he wasn't actually sorry. At first, I tried to act understanding. "You've been working hard," I said. "You deserve some time to relax." He'd smile, kiss my cheek absently, and vanish into the night with a scent of cologne stronger than usual. I told myself it was fine. I told myself not to be the controlling girlfriend. But every time he left, the silence in my apartment got louder. The dinner I'd made would go cold, the wine would stay unopened, and I'd sit there imagining him laughing with Madison, the woman who could sing on bars and make chaos look glamorous. I hated that image, but I couldn't shake it. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust what he wanted. 2. Fridays later, I decided to surprise him at the bar he said he was going to. I'd never done something like that before. It felt desperate out of character, but my gut wouldn't let me rest. The moment I stepped inside, I saw him, and her. Madison was easy to spot tall, glowing in the way women do when they know all eyes are on them. Richard was leaning close, saying something in her ear, and she laughed that kind of laugh that pulls the whole room into it. He looked alive in a way he hadn't looked with me in months. I froze by the doorway. I could have stormed over. I could have shouted, but instead I just stood there, invisible, in a place that used to feel safe because of him. Then I turned around and left. That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about that word safe. He'd said it like it was an insult, like stability was a cage instead of a home. But as I stared at the empty side of my bed, I realized something else. He didn't want calm. He wanted chaos disguised as passion. And Madison was chaos personified. Still, I couldn't bring myself to end it, not yet. Because part of me, the naive part still clinging to hope, wanted him to choose me without being forced to. I wanted to believe that love was enough to outlast temptation. I wanted him to remember who I was before Madison reminded him of who he used to be. The next morning, he texted casually. "Didn't make it home last night. Crashed at Ben's place after drinks." No apology, no explanation, just an update as if it were normal. I stared at the screen for a long time, my fingers trembling over the keyboard before typing. "Okay, hope you had fun." Then I deleted it. He didn't deserve even that much of my energy. A week later, he showed up at my apartment, acting like nothing was wrong. He brought coffee and croissants like it was some peace offering. We sat at the kitchen table, the air heavy with things neither of us wanted to say. He leaned back, sighing. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" I looked at him. The nerve of that question almost made me laugh. "I'm fine," I said, lying smoothly. "Just thinking a lot. About what I shrugged. Us." He frowned. Oh God, not one of those talks again. That made something in me snap. One of those talks, I repeated. "Richard, you called me boring for wanting to move forward. You disappear every weekend and act like I'm the problem for caring." He rubbed his forehead, exhaling. "Deborah, please don't make this dramatic. You're overthinking again." "Am I?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "Because it kind of feels like you've already checked out." He hesitated, a flicker of guilt, but it vanished just as quickly. "You always twist everything into something heavy," he muttered. "That's what I mean, you take the fun out of things." I stared at him, feeling something cold and unfamiliar crawl up my spine. "You want fun," I said quietly. "But you don't want love." He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. "Do you still talk to Madison?" I asked. He blinked clearly, not expecting it. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It has everything to do with it," I said. "Because every time you say her name, you light up in ways you never do with me." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You're jealous. She's just a friend." "Then why do you sound happier talking about her than you do talking to me?" He stood up, shaking his head. "You know what, I can't do this right now." "Yeah," I said, standing too. "I think that's the problem. You never can." When the door closed behind him, I expected to cry, but I didn't. I just sat back down at the table, staring at the coffee he'd brought, now gone cold. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt, I felt empty, like someone had turned off the noise in my head and left nothing but quiet. That night, I didn't wait for his text. I didn't check if he'd seen my stories or liked my posts. Instead, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in months. I keep trying to calm his storm, but maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe I'm supposed to leave it and save myself. When I put the pen down, I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. A few days later, he called. "Hey," he said casually, "you've been distant. Did I do something?" I almost laughed. "Richard, you've done many things," he sighed. "Deborah, I don't want to fight. I just want us to be okay." "Then stop treating me like I'm the boring alternative," I said softly. "Because I'm not." He went silent. For once, he didn't have a snappy comeback. Finally, he said, "I'll call you later." But he didn't, and I didn't wait. That weekend, I passed a bar downtown and heard music spilling out, someone singing loudly off-key, but joyful. When I peeked through the window, I saw Madison standing on a chair, surrounded by laughter. And right beside her, Richard watching her like she was the sun. I didn't stay to see the rest. I walked away before anyone noticed me, before I could start convincing myself that I wasn't replaceable. Because maybe I was, to him. But maybe that wasn't the tragedy I once thought it was. Maybe it was freedom. When you love someone who doesn't value peace, you start mistaking chaos for connection. That's how I spent the last few weeks with Richard, waiting for moments of calm that never lasted long enough to feel real. He still texted me occasionally, still dropped by with that effortless charm that once made me melt. But every time he smiled, I could tell it wasn't for me anymore. It was for whoever was on the other end of his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The nights felt longer, the bed colder. Even when he was there, his mind wasn't. I tried to convince myself that this was just a phase, that love could survive through exhaustion, through distance, through one-sided effort. But then one evening, when the air between us felt like smoke, I decided to stop lying to myself. He came over after work, his shirt half untucked, smelling faintly of whiskey. "Rough day?" I asked. "Not really," he said, tossing his keys on the counter. "Just drinks with Madison and a few people from the office." The name hit me like a pebble dropped in still water. Tiny ripples of hurt spread across the surface of my heart, but I didn't show it. "Do you ever hear yourself?" I asked quietly. He looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You talk about her like she's the only part of your life that still excites you." He groaned. "Deborah, not this again. You're reading too much into everything." "No," I said, standing now. "I'm finally reading it exactly as it is." He frowned, clearly irritated. "You really can't stand it when I have female friends, can you?" I laughed softly. "Friends. Is that what you call it?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The kind of quiet fury that doesn't scream, it just ends things. So I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "Are you seeing her?" He stared at me for a long moment before replying. "Not officially. But she makes me feel alive in ways you never could." That was it. There it was, the truth I'd been dragging out of him piece by piece. He said it like it was freedom, but for me it was clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything or beg him to stay. I just nodded once and said, "Then you've already made your choice." He blinked, caught off guard. "Wait, what? I'm not going to compete for someone who's already decided I'm not enough." "Deborah, come on," he said, trying to laugh it off. "You're overreacting. It's not that serious." I tilted my head slightly. "It's serious enough for me." There was a silence so sharp it could cut glass. He looked away, first muttering, "You'll regret walking away." I smiled faintly. "Maybe. But at least I'll be walking towards something honest." He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. And just like that, the apartment was quiet again. That's when I noticed how peaceful that silence felt. No tension, no second-guessing, just air. I looked around at all the things that used to make me feel connected to him. The coffee mug he left, the sweater draped on the chair, the toothbrush beside mine. And for the first time, instead of feeling comfort, I felt the weight of everything I'd been carrying alone. I started packing that night, not in a frenzy, but carefully, methodically. Every folded shirt, every picture frame was a decision to reclaim myself. When I found one of his notes from months ago, "You're my calm place," I almost laughed. He said he loved my calmness, then punished me for not being chaos. The irony wasn't lost on me. By midnight, my suitcase was full. I took one last look around the apartment that had held so many versions of me, hopeful, patient, heartbroken, and whispered, You wanted excitement, Richard. I hope you find it. Then I left my key on the counter and walked out. The first night alone was the hardest. I stayed in a small rental room with peeling paint and a mattress that creaked. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was mine, and that was enough. When the sun rose, it felt different. Like I'd finally stepped out of a storm I didn't realize I'd been standing in. For days after Richard didn't call, he didn't text, and I didn't expect him to. He was probably busy chasing electric nights with Madison, drowning himself in the kind of chaos he called passion. Meanwhile, I found myself relearning silence, learning that peace isn't the absence of sound, it's the absence of fear. The first few mornings, I woke up reaching for a phone that didn't buzz anymore, but slowly that ache started to dull. Because the truth was, the more distance I put between us, the more I could finally hear myself. 3 weeks later, I saw a photo online. Richard and Madison. They were laughing in a bar, her hand on his chest, his head thrown back in laughter. The caption read, "Finally living life to the fullest." I stared at it for exactly 5 seconds before closing the app. Then I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and smiled quietly. Because what he didn't know was that I was finally living too, just differently. And as the steam from my mug fogged the glass, I whispered to myself, he didn't see it coming. But the best goodbye is the one where you never look back. People always talk about heartbreak like it's loud, like it's shouting, crying, throwing things. But mine wasn't. Mine was quiet. Just me, my thoughts, and an apartment that didn't echo with his voice anymore. And for the first few weeks, that silence felt unbearable. I'd wake up every morning expecting a text from Richard, some meaningless hey or miss you that would give me permission to pretend the breakup hadn't happened. But it never came. At first, I kept my phone nearby, checking it every hour, then every few hours. Eventually, I just left it in another room. Because the truth was waiting for him was like waiting for rain in a drought. You convince yourself it's coming just to survive another day. The silence, though, began to change shape. At first, it was sharp and painful. It reminded me of everything I'd lost: his laughter, our inside jokes, the rhythm of having someone always there. But slowly the silence softened. It became something else. Space. Space to breathe. Space to think about who I had been before I tried to fit into his version of love. I started small. A walk in the morning before work. A cup of coffee in a cafe I used to love but stopped visiting because he didn't like the parking there. Little things. Tiny rebellions against the version of myself that only existed in his shadow. After a week, I joined a yoga class. After 2, I signed up for the gym. It wasn't about changing my body. It was about feeling like I had control over something again. At first, I felt awkward, out of place among people who seemed to already know what they were doing. But every drop of sweat felt like proof that I was still here, still capable of rebuilding, still capable of choosing myself. My friends noticed before I did. "You're glowing lately," my best friend Lauren said one night over dinner. "Like you've finally exhaled after holding your breath for too long." I laughed, a little self-conscious. "Maybe I have." She tilted her head. "Have you heard from him?" "No," I said. "And I'm not checking." That made her smile. "Good. Let him miss the woman who learned to love her own peace." Weeks passed, then months. And one morning I realized I hadn't thought about Richard for an entire day. Not once. That's when I knew I was healing. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden burst of freedom, no montage-worthy moment. Just quiet mornings that didn't hurt anymore, evenings that didn't ache with loneliness. Just calm. Every now and then, I'd hear about him through mutual friends. Apparently, he and Madison were inseparable, always posting photos from bars, concerts, parties. "Honestly, it looks exhausting," one friend said. I smiled politely, but said nothing. Because deep down, I already knew how that story ended. People who chase chaos eventually get burned by it. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to watch it happen. Instead, I filled my time with things I'd forgotten I loved. Books, painting, weekend hikes. I even started learning guitar again. Something I'd put away years ago because Richard once joked I wasn't the artsy type. It's strange how much you can shrink yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone without realizing it. But silence has a way of showing you who you were before the noise. Sometimes late at night, I'd catch myself thinking about him not with pain, but with gratitude, because losing him had forced me to rediscover myself. He'd called me boring, but I was finally learning that being boring meant having peace. It meant quiet mornings instead of screaming matches, consistency instead of confusion, stability instead of storms. Maybe I wasn't too safe for love. Maybe he was just too reckless to recognize what love really looked like. 3 months after the breakup, I stood in front of my mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, though I did, but because I felt different. My eyes were steadier. My smile was real. I didn't flinch at my reflection anymore. The woman staring back at me wasn't waiting for anyone to choose her. She had already chosen herself. And in that silence, the one that once felt unbearable, I finally heard the most peaceful sound in the world. My own heartbeat. Steady, strong, free. 6 months. That's how long it took for the silence I'd built to reach him. I wasn't looking for updates about Richard anymore, but sometimes life doesn't wait for permission to show you how the story ends. It started with a text from Lauren. "You won't believe this," Madison posted some messy breakup quotes. "Looks like your ex finally got his dose of chaos." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, smiling faintly at how predictable it all was. Not long after the messages began. At first, it was almost polite. "Richard, hey, hope you're doing okay. Been thinking about you lately." Richard, "You always made life feel calm. I miss that." I stared at the words on my screen. The same man who once told me I was too safe now missed the calm he'd mocked. I didn't answer, because silence I'd learned was louder than any reply. A week later, another message arrived. "Richard, I know I hurt you. Madison wasn't who I thought she was. I made mistakes. Can we talk?" I put my phone face down and went back to painting. Each brushstroke was smoother than his words ever were. He wasn't reaching out because he loved me. He was reaching out because his chaos had burned him. Then came the calls. Unknown numbers, late-night voicemails. His voice was quieter now, thinner, as if regret had hollowed him out. "Deborah, I know you don't owe me anything, but I'm sorry. I was stupid. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the night he laughed at me for wanting a home together, the way he said boring like it was poison, and the pity disappeared. He didn't stop there. Mutual friends started sending messages on his behalf. "Hey, Richard's been trying to reach you. He's not doing great. Can't you just talk to him once?" Even his mother commented on one of my photos online. "Madison was a mistake. You were the kind of woman he needed. Please give him a chance." I deleted the comment without replying. Because what no one seemed to understand was that I didn't need closure. I already had it. It came the moment I realized I didn't miss him anymore. A few weeks later, I saw him in person by accident. I was walking out of a bookstore when he appeared from the crowd like a ghost from a past life. He looked different, thinner. Tired eyes clouded with exhaustion instead of arrogance. "Wow," he said softly. "You look amazing." "Thank you," I replied, calm and steady. He gave a nervous laugh. "Guess you've been doing well." "I have," I said simply. He hesitated, then took a step closer. "Deborah, listen, I know I messed up. Madison, she cheated on me, lied to me, used me." His voice cracked slightly like he was telling me something tragic, but all I heard was irony. "I'm sorry that happened," I said. I realize now what I had. You were everything I needed, and I threw it away for something fake." I tilted my head. "You didn't throw it away, Richard. You traded it, and you got exactly what you paid for." He flinched the truth, slicing sharper than anger ever could. "I want to make things right," he said desperately. "Just one more chance." I took a breath, then smiled faintly. "You had your chance. You used it to tell me I was boring." His eyes filled with something that looked like regret or maybe panic. "You really won't even think about it." I shook my head. "No, Richard. I already did. That's why I'm free." That night, I lit a candle and opened my journal again, the same one I'd written in the night I left him. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "The man who called me safe is now begging for shelter, but peace doesn't wait for those who once feared it." When I put the pen down, I realized something. His chaos no longer touched me, not even a ripple. A few days later, another message arrived. "Richard, I understand. I wish you nothing but happiness. You deserve it." I didn't respond, but I whispered a quiet truth to myself. I already found it. Because for the first time, happiness wasn't a person. It was me, my silence, my peace, my life rebuilt brick by quiet brick. And somewhere out there, while Richard was finally learning what real loneliness felt like, I was learning that the best revenge is simply never needing one. A year after I walked away from Richard, life had changed in quiet, beautiful ways. My mornings began with calm instead of anxiety. My evenings ended with peace instead of questions. And somewhere between the silence and the sunlight, I realized I hadn't just survived heartbreak, I'd rebuilt myself from the ashes of it. When Tyler, one of our mutual friends, sent an invitation to his engagement party, I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to avoid the risk of running into Richard. But then another voice whispered, "Why hide from the past when you've already outgrown it?" So I went. The party was held at a small rooftop venue, glowing under string lights and laughter. Music drifted through the air, soft and warm. When I walked in, people turned to look. A few double takes, a few compliments. It wasn't vanity that made me notice, it was realization. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet background girl in someone else's story. I was the one who had learned to stand in her own light. And then I saw him, Richard. He was standing near the bar, talking too fast, laughing too loud. The same old performance. But the years had left marks on him that charm couldn't cover. He looked older, duller. His once confident grin had faded into something forced. When his eyes found mine, his whole expression shifted. "Wow," he breathed, stepping closer. "Deborah, you look incredible." "Thank you," I said, polite but distant. There was a long pause. The music carried on between us, but it felt like we were standing in another world, the one we'd both left behind. He ran a hand through his hair. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But I'm glad I did." He gave a nervous laugh. "Guess you've been doing well." "I have," I said simply. You look happy." "I am." His smile faltered a little. "I'm glad. You deserve it." I could tell he wanted to say more, so I waited. He hesitated, eyes lowering. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. For calling you boring, for pushing you away, for all of it." I studied him quietly. The man in front of me wasn't the same one I'd once loved. That Richard had been careless, untouchable. This one looked lost. "I appreciate that," I said gently. He exhaled in relief, taking a small step closer. "Madison and I, we didn't last. She cheated, lied, drained me dry. It was chaos. You were right. You were always right." I tilted my head slightly. "You said once that you didn't want safe, that you wanted someone who made you feel alive." He winced. "Yeah, I was an idiot." "Maybe not," I said softly. "You just wanted fireworks. You never realized how quickly they burn out." He swallowed hard. "Deborah, I miss what we had, you and me. The peace, the trust, the calm. I didn't know how much I needed that until I lost it." His voice broke a little. "Can we start over?" For a moment, I looked at him and saw flashes of the man I used to love, the small moments that once made me stay. But then I remembered the woman who waited in silence for a love that never respected her peace. So I smiled sadly. "No, Richard, we can't." He blinked. "Why not? You forgave me, didn't you?" "I did," I said. "But forgiveness isn't an invitation to return." He looked genuinely hurt now, like he'd expected me to crumble the way I used to. "I've changed," he said quickly. "I can make it right this time." I shook my head. "You don't need to. You already taught me what I needed to learn." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, meeting his eyes, "that peace isn't boring. It's sacred. And I won't trade it for chaos ever again." He stared at me speechless, and for the first time I didn't see power in his silence, I saw defeat. I stepped back and smiled politely. "Take care of yourself, Richard." Then I turned and walked away, the sound of my heels soft against the floor, steady, certain, final. Behind me, I could feel his gaze lingering heavy with what-ifs, but I didn't look back. Because the real ending wasn't about him losing me. It was about me finally realizing he no longer had any hold on me. Later that night, I stood alone by the railing, watching city lights shimmer below. The air was cool, calm, the kind of night I used to dream of when my heart was still in pieces. And for the first time, I felt entirely whole. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and smiled to myself. "He once said I was too safe," I whispered. But that safe life he mocked became the life I always wanted. And as laughter echoed behind me and music floated through the air, I realized the story wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about peace, about growth, about finally being the storm and the calm all on my own.